son of a bitch!
One moment, please. I bring you a message. Exactly 6 miles north of Skag Mountain in the Valley of Pain, there lives an evil devil monster. His name is Bingo Gas Station, Motel Cheeseburger with a side of aircraft noise, and you'll be Gary, Indiana. And he loves to hurt people. The last time I saw Bingo Gas Station, Motel Cheeseburger with a side of aircraft noise, and you'll be Gary, Indiana, he told me what he wants to do. He wants to come down here and kill each and every one of you. But I said to him, Bingo, wait a minute. And the reason I said that is because I believe in you people. I believe you can do the job. I believe you can help each other. I believe you can make this world a better place to live in. That's it.
Never mind, this is how you say bingo. Just tell us whether there is a life after death or not.
The following film podcast frequently contains adult content, including foul language and descriptions of adult situations. Spoilers for the films discussed occur often. Listener discretion is advised. Now take it away, Dr. Rausch.
They must be destroyed on sight.
Hello and welcome back to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. This is episode 158. I am your host, Lee. If you feel, you heal, Russell. And I'm joined by my co-host, Daniel. I'm not bizarre enough, Harper. How you doing, sir?
Doing well.
Cool. And we are doing a listener request, and this is going to be our official start into a little series of Westerns. So we thought we'd get rid of the weirdest one first, I guess, basically.
Weirdest is a very much subjective term, but probably that's going to be the way this goes. Yeah, sure.
I think I'm objectively right on this one.
Okay, fair enough.
But yeah, we're going to be looking at Greaser's Palace from 1972, and this was requested by Jeff Williams in the Facebook group. So there we go. We do have some comments to get through here, so we'll get through them as quickly as possible. And first one from Jay Deering. He said, finally listened to the Host That Jack Built episode, and it's pretty much what I expected. You either love it or hate it. I like to make monthly submissions of films I love that most people generally hate. Call it Jay Deering's Shit Pick of the Month. Hey, if you want to do it, we'll read it on podcast, Jay. And then he finished... And
maybe eventually do some of the movies.
Yeah, he says, now you have...
I would like to say I was going to show up for that. Like, I did not avoid last week's episode because I didn't want to watch the movie. I had so much other shit going on last weekend, and I was just exhausted and just kind of couldn't show up. And so I do apologize. I was totally going to show up and do that one, and I just didn't. So, sorry about that.
I think you got lucky. Jay also finishes by saying, now you have to cover Pasolini's Salò, 120 Days of Sodom. No, I don't think we're doing that. Not anytime soon, anyway. Because... I
mean, I've seen it. Dude shits in a bowl and makes a kid eat it. Later on, they torture a bunch of kids to death. My feeling on that movie and on that kind of cinema is, yes, it's very effective at giving you a visceral reaction, and you're either going to respond kind of positively to that or negatively. But it's also like, I understand that 120 Days of Sodom is about the rise of fascism in Spain. It's not really about that intelligently, Mm-hmm. I kind of compare it to something like American Psycho, the book, more so than the movie. The movie kind of, I'm not a huge fan of the movie, but the movie at least, sort of attempts to. But the book is basically, let's read long sections of, descriptions of Patrick Bateman, nailing women's hands to floors and stuff like that. There's a whole, pages and pages and pages of these fantasies, and interspersed with descriptions of these guys talking about the kind of coke they're going to do and that sort of thing. And it's like, yeah, this is just a little bit obvious. I mean, in American Psycho, like if you read interviews with Brady Snellis, he'll say, yeah, well, if you look at like the exact descriptions of the things they're wearing, they basically look like clowns. They're not, there is a kind of a metaphorical element beneath that. But at the same time, it's, but what's the effect on this, by and large? And I'm not saying I don't want to watch these kind of movies. I'm not saying I don't find that there's like a value to it or anything, but there is this sort of sense of, it's kind of a one-note gag. What do you want me to say? Yeah. There's no review to it. It's just kind of like, oh, it's an experience, and then you're done with it, and then it's over, I would actually be interested in bringing people who do like these films on to talk about them, who would like to discuss what's longer than like a 2-minute review of this. It's kind of my answer to that.
And I'll say this, the Von Trier film we did last week, I think there's definitely more stuff going on in that film than just, for shock value or whatever. But even then, Paul and I were like, we were really pulling shit out of our ass to try to talk about anything in that film. Yeah, we're probably going to do some more stuff along those lines, Jay, and feel free to post your shit pick of the month, and we'll read it on the show for sure. Sometime down the road. I don't want to be hostile. I'm not trying to be like an asshole about it. I'm just trying to say, like, we're talking about a review. I mean, even something like the Battle of Algiers, which we both really liked, kind of turned into what is there to talk about? This is amazing. Yeah. It's this kind of narrative, I feel like, the podcast requires us to have something to push against, some like material to kind of respond to. And I look at something like, which I saw like 15 years ago, 120 Days of Sodom, and I watched it once. It was an experience. I'm kind of over whatever experience, and it's not that it's unpleasant. It's just that it's just kind of one note, for me. So I would love to hear the answer to like, why is this worth revisiting and discussing? That would be the, my answer to that. So, yeah. Daru Macalis chimes in and says, enjoyed the episode and hearing how much you guys hated it. He's not seen The House That Jack Built yet, but have liked some of Von Trier's work, though mainly some of his previous stuff like Dogville or Breaking the Waves. Thanks for the fun. And he goes on to say in another comment, really enjoyed your older episode on Fargo. Great to hear Jack again, and really liked his take on part of the movie being a slant on the true crime picks. Love this film so much. Saw it first when I was a student, and it stayed with me like a friend I always want to spend time with ever since. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I agree with that on Fargo.
That's a film I can always go back to. Like, that's,
I put that on pretty regularly, especially when it's on like a streaming service that I have easy access to, and it comes up. I almost always hit play on it. I think I actually own that on DVD twice, because I think I bought the original DVD, and then like later they came out with a like basically just special edition, not even like with any more special features, but just they sort of improved the quality of the print slightly. And I also own that one. I think I do own that one twice. So
nice. And then we go to Jeff Williams, who gives his recommendation of the week. And he says, it's time to brush up on your ghostly laugh technique by experiencing the lunacy that is Holy Flame of the Martial World. It's a martial arts film. He posted a picture from it, and it has a Pai Mei looking motherfucker. Looks like he's yelling. We'll keep that in mind. Thank you, Jeff.
A Pai Mei motherfucker yelling is something I need in my life in 2019. Definitely. Not necessarily in my personal life. I would not like to learn martial arts from a ghostly Pai Mei. But cinematic form in a 90-minute format, I'm totally down for that.
I don't need a ancient immortal misogynist who hates Japanese people teaching me martial arts. That's probably not the way to go. And we have one YouTube comment, and thankfully it's on the side of not horrifically racist and stupid.
So like in the top 1% of YouTube comments, got it. All right.
Yeah, so someone called Abukayana Love says a part of me died when Truck Turner killed Nichelle Nichols. Well, there you go.
That's I get that. I understand. I feel
I want to maybe let Mr. or Mrs. Love know though that he didn't really kill Nichelle Nichols. I hope we're clear on that. That was just in a movie. I hope they know. It's just,
I'm pretty sure it's still alive, isn't she?
Yeah, it's YouTube. You never can be sure.
Although Isaac Hayes is not. So
yeah. Yeah.
Really, ultimately, Nichelle Nichols got the top end of that, confrontation.
She did.
In the long run.
Going to just briefly mention that the latest episode of Blood on the Tracks just posted that today, as of the day we're recording. So that would be Saturday night. And that's my second look at Policio Teschi soundtracks and scores. So people interested in that stuff, you can download it from our main feed. And now we'll transition over to stuff we've watched in the last little while. And I'll let you go first there, Daniel.
Sure. I just wanted to catch up on a couple of things. One is I did mention in a previous episode the Monster, the Zodiac Killer podcast. Mm-hmm. Episode 15 has dropped, so that podcast is done. I think they'll probably do some like bonus episodes. They did that in the first season. It's weird that, as much as I kind of spoke highly of that earlier, 4 or 5 episodes ago, it really kind of it doesn't really come to any like real conclusion. It's really just kind of an examination of the world of the sort of Zodiac Killer. Like, it describes the crimes and describes the kind of world in which these things happen, and then kind of goes into, the researchers and everything, but it does kind of lack a certain rigor in the way that it approaches some of this stuff. And I found that to be because I actually was like really interested in the first season about the Atlanta child murders in the late 70s. And so I went back and listened to that one as well. And it sort of has that same problem of it definitely kind of, it gives you a lot of information, but it doesn't really synthesize that information in what I think is like a reasonable way. It really doesn't, like, they seem to be really scared to really draw any kind of conclusions or even sort of inferences based on it. It's just kind of like, well, this is what happened, and like that's the thing, and like we had this person come forward and claim this, and that's just the thing that happened. And it's very interesting in terms of a kind of impressionistic look in terms of, looking at these crimes and kind of like seeing like what the experience of researching them is. But I do feel like that maybe it's just sort of the desire to kind of not get sued or not feel like, we're kind of doing anything in particular. But I really wanted both of those seasons to kind of come to at least some kind of broad conclusion, at least some sort of like, but it does feel like they kind of peter out at the end. And that was really disappointing. But I do really like them. And that first, of the 15 episode season, the first 10 episodes are really, really good. And there's a lot of really good information. I think it responds to the Fincher film pretty well. Just wanted to mention that because I mentioned it in the prior episode. The other thing I watched this yesterday, finally, after 3 weeks in cinemas. I did get to see the new Captain Marvel film. Mm-hmm. Everybody listens to this knows that the MCU is basically my like popcorn comfort food stuff, and Captain Marvel served that perfectly well. It does do the thing of making me feel like an ancient, old, decrepit man by making my teenage years a source of nostalgic fun. But that's fine. That's fine. That's not a fault of the film. That's a fault of time being a thing that exists. But yeah, no, I really liked the film. I liked the relationship. Brie Larson is kind of amazing in it. I love the relationship between her and Samuel L. Jackson. I love the kind of the storyline of it. Just it's very kind of straightforward, but at the same time, it is an origin story, but it also kind of serves the purpose of kind of telling it. It's almost like a kind of Born Identity kind of plot where there's like amnesia kind of going on, and so you get kind of a narrative through line while you're kind of also getting the backstory at the same time. It ends with some pretty cool action stuff. I mean, it's a perfectly fine, serviceable like summer movie. I understand why it's made $1 billion. It punches all those like happy buttons without really kind of being anything that's like complicated or kind of gives you a real, some of these films are much deeper than this one. This one seems to be kind of more on that kind of light, fluffy popcorn version. But if that's what you're looking for and you haven't seen it because the film's already made $1 billion, but I liked it. I like almost all these films. It served its purpose. MCU, you're still doing a good thing by my regard.
Yeah. I liked it, even though I could clearly tell this is not a movie that's aimed at 30, 40-year-old white dudes. It's really not. And then I see that's like a lot of the complaints about it is that, oh, they didn't make an MCU movie for me this time out. Well, fuck you.
I mean, it worked fine for me, and I'm in that demographic.
No, it still worked for me. Like I'm not some screaming man-child who gets offended if it has a female protagonist. I think the movie's really well made, and I think it's really something you'd want to like take your daughter to, and see, because You have a female protagonist who keeps getting knocked down throughout the entire movie. She gets gaslighted for half the fucking movie.
Oh yeah. No, there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, the Wonder Woman film was decent. Like, I liked the Wonder Woman film. In a lot of ways, this is sort of the good version of the Wonder Woman film.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. There's more of an arc here with Captain Marvel and
in Brie Larson. I've loved her for years now. Like, she is amazing as an actress, and I think she does some really good work here. Even though I think that the character is a little bit underwritten, you know. But
yeah,
I think she sells it really, really well.
It was really weird hearing the soundtrack though, and I feel like sometimes maybe it inappropriately jumped in at times, but it was still like, oh, there's Elastica all of a sudden being played in a scene, and oh, there's Nirvana being played in a scene. How about that old band Nirvana from like almost 30 years ago now?
The thing is, like, for me, that stuff is just what I still listen to now. So it was like, oh yeah, it's just that song I like. That's all that was for me. I was just on board with it. So, you know. Anyway.
Yeah. No, it's
fun movie. Fun movie.
I'll just mention two things, and they're both Netflix films, and I thought they were both pretty decent. I saw Triple Frontier, which was the Ben Affleck, Oscar Isaac's basically like mercenary film, where they one of the mercenaries gets a tip, like he's working with I think they go to Colombia or someplace in South America, and there's this drug lord that they've been trying to catch, and he gets a tip on where this guy's money is and how they can get it. So he goes back to his old army buddies who are all kind of struggling. Like, it does kind of touch on how a lot of people who join up for the U.S. military service, they basically by the end of their tour, they're not supported by their government anymore. They're not rewarded really for putting their lives on the line. They just sort of come back and have to find jobs, and a lot of them struggle with lots of shit. So they do touch on that a little bit, and this is kind of like a men on the mission film that's not fun. and I'm a little conflicted by that. Like, I really love men on a mission films, but I kind of want a little bit of sense of maybe fun and adventure in them too. Even, there can be serious parts to them, and it can be deadly serious and all, but this one's just really deadly serious. Like, this one.
And yet your favorite film is Sorcerer. So
yeah. No, I know.
Yeah,
I know.
Look at the fun of, almost dying for.
Yeah, no, I know I'm a hypocrite when I'm talking about this, but there's something about this one. It was just kind of depressing. It was just, wow, these guys are just making all the wrong decisions, and they're setting up. They're basically putting themselves in their own coffins. I'll just spoil it. Ben Affleck, he just gets his fucking head ventilated near the end of the movie just because of something he did earlier. It catches up with him. Generally pretty good. Like, pretty. It feels realistic. Like, this is like kind of what former soldiers who become mercenaries, kind of what they probably end up facing. Like, because they go into countries pretty much illegally and kill people. Is this
a modern film, or is this?
It's modern, yeah.
So it's set present day. Because I was watching and thinking, like, man, this feels like something that's supposed to be set in like 1984 or something. Like during the age of the like the Colombian drug runners and all that kind of stuff. Not to say that the U.S. isn't still involved in Latin America and doing like terrible things, but it did feel just a little bit. Oh yeah, this feels a little. I assumed it was a period piece based on the trailer.
I don't know. I didn't get that sense. Maybe I just totally blanked on it, but I didn't.
No,
I didn't get.
I'm not saying it is. I haven't watched it.
Yeah,
I'm saying like just kind of watching the like two minutes of it. I just kind of in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, this is set in sometime in the late '80s or something. But
still for like a men on a mission film, it's pretty contemporary, all things considered. Like, because most of the peak of that genre is all like 60s and 70s films. So
sure.
The other one I watched just came out. The Highwaymen with Kevin Costner and Woody Harrelson. And this is a different take on the Bonnie and Clyde story, because this one doesn't follow Bonnie and Clyde. It follows the two retired Texas Rangers who are brought back as basically special highway marshals or something like that. They're given like bullshit titles because it was done a little bit off the books, but they were brought back because they had skills as manhunters. So they were brought back to hunt down Bonnie and Clyde, and they eventually did. And that didn't end very well for Bonnie and Clyde.
Spoilers.
Yeah, spoilers. No, I really liked it a lot. It doesn't do what Bonnie and Clyde from the 60s did, where it sort of romanticized the two characters. They're treated more like almost mythical in a way, untouchable, unseeable. Like they're always shot from a distance, or their faces are obscured for the most part. And it's more about the two characters. They're basically two aging cowboys, because before they became Texas Rangers, they were basically just cowboys, like doing cowboy shit, like at the end of the cowboy times. And so they come out of retirement. And this movie could be "I'm too old for this shit," the movie, basically, because they're both because they're
this sounds like something we need to do on the podcast, because like I've been kind of eyeing this one as like, oh, Costner and Harrelson, I'm interested in this. Also, this could be awful. There is, sort of like a lot of the Netflix program, particularly the sort of dramatic programming, has a little bit of a like paint by numbers approach. Like, there have been pieces written. We've seen kind of people talk about the way that like Netflix is essentially like designing series and designing their original programming by algorithm at this point. Like, and so there is like, oh, this slots into some particular thing, and we're going to spend $40 million making it, but we're going to get so much like return back, and it's just this kind of mindless pap, even though it might be like decent quality, but it's literally designed to just kind of give you the 2 hours of entertainment that convince you to keep spending the $10 a month on your Netflix subscription, etc. And that has been like elevated to the point of being like beyond there's a human being actually making decisions. It's just kind of, and that's why a lot of the programming kind of feels samey. That said, if it works, it works, and I'm not going to complain about that. And I am interested in seeing the movie, so I'll probably try to like put that on at sometime this week. So
yeah, I don't see how this one would be programmed for anybody, because if your attention span is fairly short, you'd probably check out really quick, because this is a pretty slow burn kind of film in a lot of ways. Like it's mostly just Woody Harrelson and Kevin Costner complaining about how much their like limbs ache and how old they are, and there's a running joke of Woody Harrelson has a bad bladder, so he always has to piss everywhere they go, and it was really decent. Like I'm kind of convinced that Kevin Costner should only play lawmen from the first half of the 20th century. I think that's where he's at his best. And here where he's a little bit overweight, like he's carrying a little bit of a belly, he's losing a few inches on his neck, like it's becoming more of his chin. He's very convincing as just this.
You kind of have me at Woody Harrelson and Kevin Costner as aging buddy cops in, pre-1950 America. I'm kind of on board with, I'll watch this. It doesn't, that's fine. Like, I don't care what the story. Like, just give me that movie. I'm fine. Yeah.
So I think I'll leave it at that. Like we should put that on the list when we go into crime films. So again, good. So I think both are worth watching. By the way, so we'll leave it at that. Do we want to mention the Marvel podcast we're planning now, or should we save it for the end?
We might as well do it now, because you've already mentioned it. This has been something we've been like thinking about doing for like a year now.
Yeah, I know. But Daniel put forward the idea that we should go back and look at every Marvel film from the start.
All the MCU films, starting with Iron Man and kind of working our way forward. And I think we're going to finally like actually start that and do that as a separate track on this podcast feed, and do those maybe once a month, a couple of times a month, just as we kind of have time to do it. So I think here in the next week or two, expect a new podcast thread, which we don't have a title for yet, but
I think we should call it "Mike Murphy Will Not Listen to This."
I was going to call it Cape Shit, but that's
Cape Shit. That works too.
Yeah, and we can put like an exclamation point in place of the I in the worries that may interfere with some podcast feed provider thing, whatever. I know iTunes kind of has issues with that, so we'll call it Cape Shit with an exclamation point. And then also Lee and I have been talking about doing the DC animated films and that sort of thing, and doing some of those. But I think we are going to start off and do all the MCU films as we feel like we should do them, because that's something I've been wanting to do for a little while, and just kind of have an extended conversation about them. And the occasion of Captain Marvel, and now the new Avengers, the giant $1 billion Avengers franchise movie coming out. And we are going to be doing these in order, so we're not going to do them, we're not going to cover those as they come out. We're going to wait a year and a half until we get around to it.
So you'll hear our thoughts on Endgame 3 years from now. By the way,
exactly, that's the plan. Exactly. The idea is to do the giant budget, huge movies that if we were to do them in real time might actually get us a little bit of an audience as people just kind of discover it and want to hear what we have to say, but to not do them in any kind of way that would actually aid us in our marketing, but to do them in a way that we do them years after everyone stopped caring about them. That's the goal.
That sounds par for the course of us. Yeah.
Anything that might gain us an audience, no, we actively avoid that. The whole plan is to let's talk about acid westerns from 1972 that no one's ever heard of.
Yeah. So speaking of that, we're going to segue and we are going to go to some music and some podcast promos, and we're going to come back with Greaser's Palace, which I could not find a trailer for. And I could not find any soundtrack for, so fuck you, movie. You made my job a lot more difficult. I had to actually think on my feet and find songs that were appropriate for this. So there we go. I actually had to do more work than I should have.
Clytus, I'm bored. What plaything can you offer me today?
An obscure body in the SK system, Your Majesty. The inhabitants refer to it as the planet Earth.
How peaceful it looks.
Most effective, Your Majesty. Will you destroy this Earth?
Destroy it utterly.
Send Rick and Danny in Wool Rocket Ajax.
So, just destroy it?
That's what Ming said. Don't you ever listen?
Well, there's no arguing with Ming.
Hail Ming. Wait! You see those transmissions on the Visua screen?
Crow? Nightmare on Elm Street?
Chud 2? Black Belt Jones?
Nightbreed?
What's a critter?
Oh, I've seen those things.
Flash? I guess we could wait a while before the destruction.
Yeah, and watch the movies.
And talk about them.
The Hail Ming Power Hour. Disobedience to Ming. For now.
You can find us at Legion Podcasts.
You can find us on Facebook.
iTunes.
We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram.
At www. You know what? Just Google it for yourself.
Just Google it, you bastages.
Hail Ming.
Breaking 2? Electric Boogaloo?
Samurai Cop?
Army of Darkness?
Flashdance?
We might destroy the planet if it's Flashdance.
Tell all the people that you see, follow me down. Tell all the people that you see, set them free. Follow me down. You tell them they don't have to run. We're gonna pick up everyone. Come on, take me by my hand. Gonna bury all our troubles in the sand. Oh yeah. Can't you see the wonder at your feet? Your life's complete. Follow me down. Can't you see me growing? Get your guns. The time has come to follow me down. Follow me across the sea where milky babies seem to be. Molded, flowing revelry with the one that set them free. Tell all the people that you see, it's just me. Follow me down. Tell all the people that you see, follow me. Follow me down. Tell all the people that you see will be free. Follow me down. Tell all the people that you see it's just me. Follow me down. Tell all the people that you see follow me. Follow me down. Follow me down. You got to follow me down. Follow me down. Tell all the people that you see will be free. Follow me down. Tell all the people you see follow me.
Well, Jesus gonna be here. He gonna be here soon, yeah. He gonna cover us up with leaves, with a blanket from the moon, yeah. With a promise and a vow, and a lullaby for my crown. But Jesus gonna be here, gonna be here soon, yeah. I'm not gonna do nothing but wait here. I don't have to shout, yeah. I got me no reason, yeah, and I got no doubt, yeah. I'm gonna get myself unfurled from this mortal coiled world. Jesus gonna be here soon, yeah. I got to keep my eyes, to keep them wide open, yeah, so I can see my Lord, yeah. I'm on a wonderful horizon from a brand new fall, yeah. Where I could hear 'em rolling on down the lane. I said, Hollywood be thy name, 'cause Jesus gonna be here. He's gonna be here soon, yeah. Well, I got to keep myself faithful, and you know that I've been so good, yeah. Except for drinking, but he knew that I would, yeah. And when I'm gonna leave this place better than the way I found that it was, and Jesus gonna be here. He's gonna be here soon, yeah. I know my Jesus gonna be here. He's gonna be here soon, yeah. I know my Jesus gonna be here. Gonna be here soon, yeah.
All right, Greaser's Palace from 1972, written and directed by Robert Downey Sr., Mr. Iron Man Sr. himself, I guess.
A prince.
Albert Henderson as Seaweed Head Greaser. That's a bit of a mouthful. Luana Anders as Cholera Greaser. James Antonio as Vernon. Alan Arbus, who we covered in Coffee as well, as Jesse. Yeah, I was like, I know him from somewhere. And then I looked him up and was like, oh shit, we looked at him in Coffee. He was the pimp with the weird sex stuff. He was
nice.
Yeah, he was the one who wanted
I like to think it's the same character. That's my headcanon.
He got done Pam Grier and making her go on her knees, and yeah,
and then became Jesus.
Yeah. Well, you go to one extreme, I guess you go to the other after that. Toni Basil, yes, that Toni Basil, as Indian girl, and I had flashbacks to Other Side of the Wind with this, with the naked Indian running around.
Yeah, there's definitely a bit of that, yeah.
Yeah. Don Calfa as Morris, Woody Chambliss as father, Pablo Ferro as Indian, Stanley Gottlieb as Spitunia, Joe Madden as Man with Painting, George Morgan as Coco, Ron Neely as the Card Man, and also the Ghost. And we'll talk about the Ghost here in a sec. Michael Sullivan as Lamey Homo Greaser. Some of the humor's on the nose in this film, boys and girls.
There's a lot on the nose here.
Yeah. Hervé Valenchez, Tattoo himself from Fantasy Island, as Mr. Spituna, and Lawrence Wolfe as the French Padre. And the synopsis I pulled from IMDb says, a parable based on the life of Christ. This ain't your father's Bible story, full of references about the destruction of the world through massive constipation and in a New Mexican setting. Yeah, okay.
How do you describe this film?
Ultimately? Yeah, I don't know. Like, good try, basically. I give you applause. So, had you heard of this film before, Daniel? And
I'm sure I'd heard of the title. I watched Putney Swope like a year and a half ago or something like that, and really liked Putney Swope. And kind of did a little bit of a just to kind of look at the history of Robert Downey Sr. during that process. Robert Downey Sr. I also know as a filmmaker because he's one of the giant influences on Paul Thomas Anderson, who is one of my favorite filmmakers, and he actually appears in Boogie Nights. He's I think he appears in both Boogie Nights and he might be in Magnolia as well. No, he's definitely thanked at the end of Magnolia. He died. Sorry, he and Paul Thomas Anderson's father both died within like a few days of each other during the like post-production on Boogie Nights, and that was like kind of a big like emotional thing that kind of led to the production of Magnolia. Robert Downey Sr. is like thanked in the credits of Magnolia. So sorry, I just was like processing my memories of that. But he actually appears in Boogie Nights. He's the record producer. Who has the when John C. Reilly and Mark Wahlberg are trying to get the tapes. It's like, no, the thing is like that fucking good, man. We're gonna get your fucking money and bring it back to you. And then he has the line like, see, that's a YP, not an MP. That's a your problem, not my problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's Robert Downey Sr.
Nice.
And at that point, Robert Downey Jr. was basically just a drug addict. He wasn't like fucking Iron Man at that point. So, weird kind of cultural touches on there. Anyway, so I kind of knew Robert Downey Sr. from that. And, there are a lot of references to his films and P.T. Anderson's films if you kind of look into interviews that PTA has to say about it, and like some of the characters. Don Cheadle's character in Boogie Nights is named Buck Swope, and that's after Putney Swope.
Okay.
Like, there's there's a lot of that kind of stuff. So I'm sure I'd heard this title before. This was kind of the big, like the one time that Robert Downey Sr. got a budget, but I'd never seen it until like this evening, and I watched it, and it has completely left my memory. By the time I finished watching it, it goes down pretty easily. It's a perfectly fine. Yeah. All right. Let me just the thing with films of this nature. I mean, you give this deeply independent filmmaker who's been working underground for years. You give him $1 million, which is $20 or $30 million today. You give him like a giant budget by his standards to produce this weird thing that's his vision, and he produces something which, I'm sure if you saw this in 1972 and you were in this kind of underground cinema, thing, you would find this to be like really interesting and intriguing. It's also very much of that particular moment.
Right.
I like to think if you gave kind of one of these like kind of abstract, lefty, YouTubers. If you gave them like $100 million and said, go make the movie of your dreams, like if you give H Bomber Guy or ContraPoints, that kind of like money, they would go off and they would make something that was in that moment brilliant, but which had no like sort of larger connection to the culture necessarily. Greaser's Palace feels very dated to me now in 1972, and in a way that even other films kind of made at the time, even other films that had kind of more like a commercial hook, because it just seems to be this sort of thing where this is Robert Downey Sr. kind of working through whatever like issues he has with Christianity and with this kind of culture. And we've just moved on so much since then that I can admire the way it's made. I can admire the verve that it took to make it. I can admire some of the comedy. I mean, a lot of it is really funny, but it's also just kind of like, I just kind of get to the end and I shrug my shoulders and say, yeah, that was made in 1972. And that's kind of my response to it.
Yeah. So it definitely is basically an allegorical tale for Christianity, specifically sort of centers around Jesus. Every character in this kind of represents some aspect of Christianity, and I think specifically it kind of like targets Catholicism more than anything else. And so Daniel and I are both atheists. Like I said, the last time I read the Bible was probably age 13. I read it all the way through just to see if there was anything to it. I thought it was pretty absurd and a lot of vignettes that went nowhere. And hey, here's this film.
I mean, so much of it. I mean, there is like the guy walks on water and he does like a song and dance number. There's a bit where he brings people back from the dead, but kind of like he heals the sick. But oh, I can crawl again. Thank you, Lord, etc. I mean,
that guy keeps crawling throughout the film. He's on crutches when he starts, and it is if you can feel, you can heal, or whatever. And fucking touches him. He drops to his knees. I can crawl again. Like.
And there's a lot of there were a lot of films made during this time period in this kind of underground cinema that were sort of mocking various kind of forms of Christianity, that were sort of mocking the sort of traditional religious piety, which in a weird way kind of became increasingly irrelevant just like 10 years later, because in the early 80s you see the rise of the religious right and this kind of rise of the evangelical subculture, which kind of changed the entire like cultural understanding of how Christianity was. I mean, and not so much changed the doctrines, although it did change a lot of the doctrines, but it just kind of changed the sort of political relationship. I mean, and this became like this sort of more partisan thing, whereas I think in like 1972, this would have felt a little bit more like we were just kind of ribbing on the establishment a little bit more, as opposed to it being like this kind of particular kind of partisan politics kind of angle to it.
Well, yeah, there's this...
And I think that there is that kind of divide also makes it difficult for us to kind of see it as it was at that time. Now you can see this as much... Like if this came out in like 2004, this is very clearly kind of poking fun at George W. Bush. In 1972, it's just kind of like a vague anti-establishment kind of thing,
Yeah, picking at religion at this point, it definitely would be picking at evangelicals, Baptists, something along those lines, right. Whereas... Here you have, like I said, Catholicism seems to be the biggest target. When I think of Catholicism, I think of old institutionalized religion, like that the elites kind of, subscribe to. So the older power structure kind of thing that kind of did dissolve as the evangelicals and stuff sort of took hold in society. This has a really absurdist feel to it. It's not quite Monty Python, but it kind of almost touches on it at times.
Yeah, I mean, there is also a little bit of this where, like, I've seen The Life of Brian a few times, and, so much of the thunder of this has been, like, stolen by Life of Brian. And Life of Brian has its problems, don't get me wrong, but, there is a sense in which, like, Life of Brian is the more kind of overtly comedic, made by, like, absolutely brilliant comic figures of the late 70s, kind of version of this. And it is kind of hard to kind of watch this now and kind of going like, yeah, this just kind of, there's a really good 30-minute movie in this.
Yeah, it feels like it should have been reined back. Like even at an hour 30, it feels a little long.
Well, and a lot of Robert Downey Sr.'s films are, short films. I mean, he has a lot of like 16-minute films and that kind of thing, and so there is a sense in which, making a 90-minute film maybe was kind of like, oh, I'm just going to make a bunch of vignettes, but it doesn't really necessarily connect together in sort of a larger, like, even though it's only 90 minutes, I found myself kind of drifting away from it a little bit, like watching.
Yeah, because it sort of jumps to things that like I don't really care about. I'm all on board seeing where Zoot Suit Jesus goes to. You know, like he literally comes into the film on a fucking parachute.
Right.
And he does a song and dance for the town, and the town is supposed to basically represent the church to a certain degree, like it's the flock and the church. Greaser himself is like basically, I think, the Catholic Church. Everybody in his gang is always confessing to him, which I thought was kind of funny. Like they're always like saying their most perverted stuff they've done over the weekend or whatever. Like, oh, I licked her clit and then I fucked her in the ass, and Greaser's just standing there taking it, you know.
Doesn't he say something like "I got her cunt juice on my face" or something like that?
Yeah, like it gets very vulgar in places, right?
But which in 1972 was fairly like radical to do. You know, like I mean, again, give him credit for give the film credit for being the thing it was. You know, I mean, it's in a sense it's not its fault necessarily that it has not aged as well. You know,
no.
Like I want to like this film, and I do kind of like this film. I'm just kind of on the like, man, I just don't want to watch it, you know?
No,
like,
it's like a one-watch movie, really. It really is. But, I mean, you know, how could Robert Downey Sr. know? Like, how could he know that this would...
Like,
yeah.
And I mean, you know, if you're making underground cinema at this time period, you know, you're lucky if you get it seen at all. You know, like that stuff would have gone to like, you know, a couple of theaters in New York City and Los Angeles and maybe a few other markets. And that's it. Like, that's all the distribution this shit ever really got. And a lot of his films have been lost. A lot of them are just they're not available in any kind of commercial format. And maybe there's a print here and there in Library of Congress or whatever. This has more availability just because it was a bigger budget and there's just a little bit more kind of stuff going on with it. But at the same time, this is not something that, like, you know, again, neither one of us had really ever heard of it until we just decided to do it for the podcast.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just sort of the reality of this kind of cinema. Like, this was not something that got a huge distribution. And like, I mean, if you were into the underground cinema scene in 1972 in New York City, and you went to like Times Square or wherever, or you went to whatever like back alley theater that was showing this, and you did a couple of tabs of acid, and you sat and you watched this, you had a perfectly fine time. There's no issue with that. You know, I mean, watching it like on my laptop on YouTube with headphones before like trying to talk about it for a podcast. This is not the way this film was meant to be seen, you know.
No, and I'm sure some of those people got a lot more out of the Holy Ghost represented by a guy in a fucking ghost sheet over his head with the eyes cut out, smoking cigars and basically complaining about his part in the Trinity, whereas you don't know me, you don't know anything about me. If you only gave me a chance, I could do a lot of cool shit, but you won't let me do anything. I do, you know, from my sort of cursory lapsed knowledge of Catholicism and stuff, I did like, you know, some of the stuff here. The Holy Ghost stuff I thought was kind of funny. I like the pioneer woman who is basically Job, who's just crawling through the desert, getting shot randomly by bullets out of nowhere.
Yep.
I like the magician. There's this one little scene. It's just a weird little scene where this magician who's doing a card trick for Greaser. And he's, you know, pick a card, any card. And then he shuffles it in the deck. Is this your card? Nope. Is this your card? Nope. Is this your card? Nope. Pretty sure that's Martin Luther. I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be Martin Luther. Like, what interpretation of the Bible is the real one, you know, kind of thing.
I think you thought about it more than I did, honestly. You know,
I was trying to pull stuff out of this because I was like, oh man, I got nothing to talk about here. I mean, you have a nun who is obviously played by a man who tries to basically rape Jesse as soon as she sees him. You have
there's a deeply, I mean, in 2019 standards, there's a deeply problematic gender dynamic at work.
Oh there, well, how about Hervé Villachez?
Yes,
who plays a midget who basically tries to you know, shack up with Jesus as well, which is, you know, and in his
he wanted to give him both the myrrh and frankincense.
Yes, and his quote unquote wife is basically like a bearded lady. It's just another man in a dress, and I can actually see directly where the movie Dead Man might have got a little bit of influence for Iggy Pop's character, because it's basically the same character.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, lots of filmmakers, particularly in the New York scene, would have seen this film and been inspired by it. So there's There's no. I'm certain that the Monty Python guys, when they were making Life of Brian, would have had this in mind. And there were other films of this kind of genre that they probably were kind of riffing on, and we just kind of remember Monty Python just because it was made by Monty Python, as opposed to this. I mean, again, I think this is a perfectly reasonable thing to make in 1972. I have no issues with it kind of existing in that time period. I'm just kind of like forced to review it as myself sitting here, almost 50 years later, and just kind of going like shrug, like it's fine, I guess,
So yeah, it's very on the nose. So unlike something like Jodorowsky's El Topo, it doesn't have the aloofness of that film where it ages way better because anyone can watch it now and pull more from it. Here it's kind of like directly, this is what it's about. And basically we're talking about your granduncle's fucking religion here. That the Uncle Granddad at the fucking family reunion that no one really cares about anymore. He just sits in the corner and talks about the blacks, and it's very much that.
You've met my family, have you?
Yeah, I think we have the same family.
It turns out, spoiler alert, Lee and I are brothers. That's been the secret thread the entire time. 158 episodes in.
But yeah, I got nothing really else to say about it. Like I thought it was an interesting watch.
Performances are perfectly fine. There's nothing, Again, Blazing Saddles is clearly kind of inspired by this. There's a sequence in it with a dancer in a hall that kind of made me think of Madeline Kahn in Blazing Saddles. There's some nudity if you like that. Yep. Worth checking out for that if you're on the line.
I did like it. I did like it a lot. I was saying, it felt like it was channeling out of the other side of the wind somehow.
It looks like there are a couple of places to see this. There's a YouTube version that's the version that I ended up watching, but it is available on Amazon Prime in a better print. But I didn't realize that till after I'd already watched most of it. On YouTube. And I think it's also available on like Vimeo and some other places, and so I mean, it seems this is there's nobody really like hunting down the copyrights on this one, so it's pretty widely available.
Yeah, I think there's I didn't do the DVD research because it was so widely available online that I figured it doesn't matter, and like I don't think either of us are like sort of giving strong recommends here, so it's not like hey, pick it up, but it's on YouTube, Vimeo, Amazon Prime. Shout Factory TV.
Yeah, Shout Factory. That's that one looked really good because I checked the print after I'd already watched it and went like, oh, that's the version I should have fucking watched.
Yeah, that one. I think the YouTube's at like 360p and the Shout Factory's at 480p, and that's about as good as you get. Like, there's no.
If you want to see the nudity, don't watch the YouTube version.
No, definitely not. But yeah, budget for this. Apparently, this was. They had $1 million backing it. This was like his biggest budgeted film.
Apparently, he had a buddy who just gave him, who was like, yeah, sure, I'll give you $1 million. Like, wouldn't that be nice to just have a buddy? And in 1972 dollars, that's like, again, $20, $30, $40 million today.
Yeah, just some independently wealthy Broadway producer or something just gave him some money. Okay, and I don't have any box office for this. Who knows how much money it made or didn't make?
This definitely did not make money.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect it. I wouldn't expect it to. A little bit of trivia for this. Robert Downey Jr., the son, of course, he has an uncredited role as the child who gets his throat slashed early on in the film. And Elsie Downey, who played the woman.
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah. You probably set him down his road to drug addiction. Elsie Downey, who played the woman, who is basically Job in this film, is, of course, Robert Downey Sr.'s wife. And also in the cast were Allison Downey and Stacey Sheehan, Downey Sr.'s daughter and niece. I mean, low budget, bring your friends and family in, that kind of thing.
It's the thing that happens.
Yeah, as I said, Toni Basil, singer, she had the hit Mickey, You're So Fine.
I feel like that song should be in the podcast ultimately.
Yeah, we could do that. And of course, she's the Indian girl. She's the naked Indian girl in this film. So, I don't know if she ever did any other films. I didn't check.
I don't know. If we were professional, if we were actually as good as the projection booth, we would have Googled that.
We probably would have, yeah. Well, no, we would have got an interview with Toni Basil.
Yeah.
Yeah. American film critic Jonathan Rosenbaum used the term acid western to describe this film, as well as the Jim Jarmusch film Dead Man. The term acid western was first coined by film critic Pauline Kael in reference to Jodorowsky's El Topo, which this film is often compared to, but yeah, El Topo is the more memorable one. It's the one people still talk about. This one is, I mean, as sad as it is, it's kind of rightly forgotten. It kind of is, yeah.
I mean, you always want things like this to be available to people, so that it is of worth to like people who study this. And I'm not unhappy I watched it, but this is definitely not one that I would say, oh yeah, seek this out. This will not make my like top 10 or even my like top 50 list this year.
Yeah, if you're a very liberal Christian, you might get a lot of value out of this, but otherwise, probably not. I don't know. There might be some fun to be had if you're a Christian who is a little, has a sense of humor.
If you're both deeply interested in the late 60s and early 70s counterculture, and a Christian, and have somehow not seen Dogma or Life of Brian, have I got the film for you?
Yeah. Start with this one and then move forward.
Yeah.
Don't see those other two first.
Yeah, no, see this one first. That's the way to do it. If you're somehow all three of those things.
Yeah. So we're continuing with our Westerns next time. I think we should just get this one off the books as well. White Comanche with William Shatner. Okay. We should just get that out of the way.
William Shatner, man, we're really like eating the shat this year. That's we're just full of shat.
Yeah, we're covered in it.
We've just gotta sit on the bowl and strain to get the shat out, like in the film, and then everything will explode.
It's a real shatastrophe. It really is. Yeah. Yeah. So we'll be looking at White Comanche from 1968, where William Shatner in a spaghetti western playing twin brothers, one an Indian savage and one half Indian, half cowboy who's civilized, and neither one of them look different at all, except for one wears face paint.
I was really hoping one would just have like a really bad mustache, and that would be the whole.
That's if he was playing a Mexican version of himself.
Oh, yeah. Right. Like you put a sombrero and a mustache on one, It's like, yo soy mexicano, señor.
Señor
¿Dónde está la biblioteca?
Hable inglés. Yeah. It's going to get super racist next episode.
I love that of all the things that we've covered in the last couple of months, like, oh yeah, let's just dive deeper into the racist cinema of the 60s and 70s.
Hey,
let's just whistle past it. It's gonna be fine, A couple of white guys talking about racism. That's always the best.
Yeah. I think it's what people come to expect from us at this point.
We just dive right in. There's no attempt to like apologize or it's just like, yeah, we're gonna talk about White Comanche. Yeah, there's like active red face in this. We're gonna make fun of it and move on. Like that's just
yeah, so we're gonna do that. So Daniel, where can people find you on the interwebs?
If you want to listen to me like take racism slightly more seriously, just a bit more seriously, I have been researching the American far right for like 2 years, which if you've been listening for a while, you probably already know, yada, yada. Anyway, I'm doing a podcast with my buddy Jack Graham called I Don't Speak German, which is all about like the worst people in the English-speaking world. And it's kind of awesome, I will say. So go check that out if you have any interest in that. Every other thing that I do is going to be at my Twitter at Daniel Lee Harper.
A lot of those new Nazis actually kind of look like a young William Shatner.
Some of them do, yeah.
Yeah. They just have the sides of their head shaved. Other than that, it's pretty much the same.
Well, which is not necessarily different from like William Shatner in general.
Yeah. Spock, I don't like your race. Yeah,
Spock,
and you
seem to be something of a mud person with that half-breed blood there.
Like in reality, Spock would have just like used his super Vulcan strength and crushed his fucking head first time out. Like they wouldn't be
definitely. Oh, definitely. Especially if it went like straight up racist like that, it'd just been like, oh yeah, and then the captain seems to have become deceased. I can't explain why.
I mean, when you think about it, the mirror universe Kirk is really just Kirk.
Yeah. No, the mirror universe Kirk is really William Shatner in real life.
That whole episode's just like an outtake where he just fucking lost it. Okay, you can find us at tmbdos.podbean.com if you so choose. I don't know after this if you really want to anymore, but you can find
Shatner
us.
Estate is going to sue us for sure. It's going to be great.
Yeah, he'll probably be dead soon. Who cares? You'll. I mean, come on. How much longer can he have? He's carrying a lot of weight. He's 80.
In any sense that we have any friends among the Trek fandom has definitely like lost us long ago, I'm sure.
Hey, I'm a Picard man. They can go all fuck themselves.
You and me both, buddy.
Yeah. So all the requisite links are there. Find our iTunes, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Facebook links. And until then, us two guys are gonna, saddle on down the road, and we'll saddle on back when we come back with White Comanche next episode. See you guys later. Goodbye.
Cheers.
You have been listening to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. For other episodes, our links to Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and our Facebook group, as well as links to podcasts and websites of similar interest, please visit us at tmbdos.podbean.com. Thank you. Drive through.